Hello, everyone, and welcome to James Talk Sport. We're a week away from the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and we know more about who is likely to win the race after E3 and Gent Wevelgem. So let's take a look at my conclusions from this weekend from the men's E3 and Gent Wevelgem and the women's Gent Wevelgem ahead of the Ronde. This weekend has been a huge day for European racing, but it's been an even bigger racing for Africa and African cycling. We know the talent pool coming out of Africa with Tesfatsion, Henkoren, I think it's how you say his name, and Mugisha to come. But in Biniam Girmay, Eritrea and Africa have a star. The others are stars of the future. Biniam was, but now he's a star of the present. He had never ridden Belgian cobbles before this weekend, let alone racing them, and he finished fifth at E3, which gave away an idea that he was in good shape. But today, earlier this afternoon at Gent Wevelgem, he created history, becoming the first African rider to win a Cobble Classic, and he did it in amazing fashion as well. He survived the Kemmelberg, survived Wout van Aert's attacks. He followed Laporte, Sturven, along with Dries van der Gestel, rode with them, sat at the back, pounced early, and nobody could get around him in the sprint. Congrats and chapeau to Biniam Girmay. Jumbo Visma came into the weekend flying after a fantastic Paris-Nice, fantastic Omloop, a very good Milan-San Remo, and they truly delivered a dominant performance at both races and very nearly picked up the result in both of them as well. They hit it up early on the Tyenberg with about 80k to go. Wout van Aert, Laporte, Tish Benoot were set up superbly. They got away in a big group, and then they started to toy with their riders. Benoot was attacking, Laporte was attacking. Even when Navarra's brought it back together, there was a couple of Ineos guys, a couple of quick step guys. We knew that Jumbo Visma were going to win, and it was a case of one, who was going to win, and two, how many were going to be on the podium. On the Paterberg, again, they led it out superbly, and Wout van Aert and Christophe Laporte got away. They would never be seen again, and Wout van Aert took the sprint to win E3 Saxo Banks Classic. And today in Gent Wevelgem, again, they were aggressive. Wout van Aert was aggressive every single time up the Kemmelberg. Tish Benoot and Laporte were in moves along with Mike Turnison. Laporte, after the final time up the Kemmelberg, got away in that small group. Probably the favourite, and the only mistake you can say that they made this weekend was Laporte sitting on the front and putting that little dig in with a kilometre to go. But what a weekend from Jumbo Visma. The team are clearly looking strong ahead of the Ronde next week. We'll talk about other good performances in a minute, but I want to touch on a few riders and teams that really need to improve ahead of the Ronde next week. Quick Step, Alpha Vinyls have been really off colour this Classics campaign. Asgreen is the only rider that looks in any form to compete for the win. Normally, they'd have such a brilliant team capable, but they seem to be off the pace this year. Whether they've, obviously they've had a lot of illness, so maybe that is playing a bigger role than we expected. But it seems as though Quick Step have been overtaken this year. Another team, Ineos Grenadiers. Yes, Jonathan Navarez and Dylan Van Baarle were up there at E3, but and Ben Turner and Dylan at Gent Wevelgem. But again, Ineos seem to be doing really well and up there until the important moments happen. Navarez had to do an incredible move on the Eichenberg to get back at E3. Dylan had to make the effort over the top of the Kemmelberg today. Um, Tom Pidcock is obviously struggling with some stomach and potentially liver issues, so his form and fitness for the rest of the classics will be unknown. Personally, I'd say tell him to go back home. And then they have youngsters like Ben Turner, who is riding very well, but shouldn't be expected and relied upon to ride well. Other teams, Trek Segafredo, were only really saved by Jasper Stuyven at E3. Today they had a better race, working for Mads Pedersen, or Jasper Stuyven, but Stuyven cocked up the sprint at the end and didn't even finish on the podium. And the final sort of big team to mention is Agile Desert Citroën. Last year they signed these riders, including Greg Van Avermaet, Bob Youngles, to be this classic dominant team to rival Quickstep. Greg Van Avermaet hasn't shown any form, although he showed signs today, and both him and Oliver Naesen were nowhere to be seen at E3 Harelbeke. Saxo Banks Classic. The team that impressed me most this weekend was Groupama FDJ, surprisingly. They've got good riders capable of doing a decent result. Stefan Kung, although he doesn't have a sprint. Arnold Demar, but he doesn't have that ability to get away. Then they've got the kids like Lewis Askey and Jake Stewart, who sadly is ill and unable to ride. But they've quietly and very sort of subtly had a very good weekend. At E3, they were covering all the moves, and one on the podium, another in the top 10, Stefan Kung third, and Valentin Madawa in seventh. And again today, they were a constant presence on the front. Arnold Demar was covering a lot of moves, making a lot of moves. Stefan Kung was behind. Olivier Legac was there, and Kevin Genietz was there as well. Even when that group of four got away, yes, they stayed away, but they did a lot of work to chase for Demar and to try and give him the chance to sprint for the win. So they are looking very good and riding very well as a team ahead of next week. On to the women's Gent Wevelgem now, and despite the aggression from FDJ, particularly Grace Brown on the Kemmelberg, the race came to a big group sprint with 39 riders in the end. You had Lorena Weaver sadly crashed out earlier in the race, but you still had Elisa Balsamo, world champion, Marta Bastianelli, and Emma Norsgaard, and Lotte Kopecky as well. You also had Marianne Vos, but her form would have been unknown because she's not raced yet. And it was, even in that final effort before the sprint, it was a very aggressive race. SD Works clearly wanted to make the race hard for Trek, who had Ellen van Dijk and Elisa Lombardini in the group chasing. Plantura Pura had a lot of aggression with Sana Khan and Yara Castelline. UAE were working hard as well, and they were trying to make it as hard as they can, but ultimately Trek delivered Balsamo to the line, and she took a commanding sprint yet again. Following her wins at Trofeo Alfredo Binder, and today I firmly expect her to be a favourite for the Ronde, although Annemiek van Vleuten to come into the race makes it very different for her and for track. Marianne Vos was in second, and Confalieri finished in third. Good result as well for Pfeiffer Georgie. The British champion finished in 15th place.